I'm Chris, I'm 66 years old, and my recovery aim is to write another paper for publication in a medical journal.
I'm Lynn, I'm 53, and my aim is to keep living a happy and healthy life.
I'm Brock, I'm 30, and I want to travel to Europe.
Well, I found out I had a brain tumour in 2009. I'd been having some issues leading up to that point. I thought I was having some sort of a breakdown and went to the GP and initially was put on an antidepressant thinking it was an anxiety issue, and I really seemed to improve. Yeah, so things were going along well, and then it was New Year's Eve and I had an amnesia thing happen. It was, I was making things for a party I was going to, and I came home, I went shopping, came home, bought everything home, and then I went out in the car again, and I don't know why I went out or where I went, and then I started to get headaches and eventually went back to the doctor to get my repeat for my antidepressant. And I told him about that incident, and he said, well, maybe we should get a CT scan just to, rule out the worst case scenario.
The thing that I vividly remember is how it first started, because I became disorientated in time. I knew exactly where I was, so it wasn't in place, but only in time. And I actually went to work on a Sunday, and I was trying to get into my office on a Sunday, and by chance a security man came along and reminded me it was Sunday, which I couldn't really understand. How can it be Sunday? Because I thought it was Monday. But I knew exactly where I was and how I got to work and how I could get home again. So that was my first indication that something was wrong. And then I rang assorted relatives, and then they took it from there, and then we're into the hospital very quickly.
Sitting in a hospital bed and you have a mass on your brain and numb, very, very numb. Luckily I had family with me at the time, and that was the support that was there to be helpful.
So the following day I had the MRI, then the day after that saw the neurosurgeon, and well, he said I needed, brain surgery, and I had about a 10-day wait for that to get my head around that.
Fear and anxiety, which I've never had anxiety in my life, and yeah, I had anxiety attacks within days. And I was put on to a psychiatrist who I saw once a week, and he was able to put my feelings into useful solutions, letting me know that it was okay to be feeling the way I was. Anger, fear, it's fine to feel like that.
I was relying on my medical team, but because I knew that, I was getting the standard recommended treatment that had shown some evidence of effectiveness, I was very comfortable and happy to follow what they recommended.
Doctor came and told me that we would need to, in the next few days, after a few scans, make a decision on what surgery, what will need to happen and what we need to take out. And that was it. Here's the consent form, and sign.
I spoke to my sister just so she could refresh my mind as to what happened, and she told me that once a scan was done and the doctor said, well, I think this is a brain cancer or brain tumour, then there was no question about, from what she said, there was no question about a second opinion or well, what do you want to do now? It was just, well, what we do is the surgery on this. And so the surgery was booked in.
I wasn't really given much information in the hospital, but when I got home, because I had a medical background, I sort of knew I had a fair idea of where to get some reliable information from. So, I didn't just Google, GBM. I went to initially the Cancer Council. They have, lots of booklets and fact sheets, and I think even a DVD. So, I had them sent to me, and there's also the Brain Tumour Australia. I think they have lots of fact sheets there, and the Brain Tumour Alliance Australia. So I knew I had, a good starting point together.
It's easy to overload, with yourself with too much information and putting yourself in a headspin where you're not understanding and taking in what you need to. And that's why having someone with you at appointments helps. They can take notes, ask questions.
Well, I think it was a big shock. I have 3 sons and a husband and extended family, and that was a big shock. My sons were at that stage only 17. My eldest son was doing VCE, my middle son was 13, and my youngest son was 10. So there was a lot going on, at home, with their sporting commitments, and I was, heavily involved in all of that. Yeah, so I think their reaction, was, well, I can't speak for them apart from to say, it was a tumultuous time.
Putting aside normal life, when you live a very active life is extremely hard. When you're working 5-6 days a week, exercising, and then it's just stop. You can't do any of that. You need to focus on the cancer. You need to focus on recovery, which the doctors were adamant about telling me because of how active I was, and it's a shock to the system. For surgery, I went public. For my radiation therapy, it was private. I wasn't given the option of public. So that was a shock when we were brought into a room, sat down and gone through billing, which we were told was going to be a minuscule amount, and it was thousands. I called the hospital straight away, quite angrily, and luckily I was on a trial and they were able to subsidise the payments, leaving us only a few thousand out of pocket.
There's a 6 weeks course of oral chemotherapy, temozolomide and radiation, and then a 4-week break, and then 6 months where you're getting only the oral chemo, the temozolomide 5 days a week, 5 consecutive days for 6 months. This is, post the surgery, the radiation and the temozolomide, I think starts about a few weeks or so after your surgery, and then there's a 4-week break after that initial course, and then the 6 months treatment follows after that. However, I only got to about the 5th month because I had a recurrence, so I had to go in for a second surgery. Okay. Yeah, that was in November 2009.
I had a craniotomy, which is the removal of the tumour. Then, after being in the hospital for some time, and it was time to leave there, I was then told I would be going on to radiotherapy, which they tell you that that's going to make you tired and, the fatigue will settle in, but you don't really know what to expect. But I found it incredibly tiring.
My treatment involved 2 craniotomies and then 7 weeks of radiation therapy. The hair loss was a shock to the side effects of the radiation therapy. It just fell out. And memory. And post-radiation therapy, it wasn't until I realised how much it had affected myself mentally.
I feel that even though the support networks are there, it was up to yourself to actually access them. Things like psychologist, exercise physiologist, any of those ancillary people, they're there waiting in the wings, but you had to find out, now which psychologist should I see? Where is the exercise physiologist located? And people spoke about them, but nothing was ever actually done. So I think people meant well, but it would have been better, I think, had people said, right, now the exercise physiologist will see you tomorrow at midday. So I did that through my GP, and there's that special group, a special arrangement, the name of which I've forgotten, but you can see allied health at a much reduced price.
With this type of diagnosis, my work life was over, and that was a big adjustment, and I did have a period of grief, and because that was such a big part of my life. That was, in a way, I was defined a little bit by that. I was proud and I was very current. I kept up to date, and all of a sudden, none of that mattered anymore, so I had to find a new direction.
Through treatment and post-treatment, working part-time hours really kept me sane. Sitting at home doesn't bode well for myself. Exercising, walking, getting out in nature. I'm fortunate enough that I have great walking trails near me, and I could put music on and just go for a walk for a few hours, clear my head. Staying active really helps myself. It may not be for everyone, but just find what you love, what makes you happy, and do it.
I go to the Olivia Newton-John support group, which is held every month, and it's just been excellent, and it's been fantastic to be able to speak to other people who have the same diagnosis, and I actually look forward to going to it each month, and we have a very nice lunch, which is particularly good. But I would really recommend for anybody with the diagnosis to seek out the support group, because they're really, really worthwhile, I felt.
Through treatment, my partner was phenomenal. I'm fortunate enough that she's a nurse and has a medical understanding. Help me understand the technical terms, what's going on, what might happen. Just help act as a translator, interpreter. And when it comes to an appointment and you're sitting there, you don't have an hour to talk about everything, so you have to jot down what's key and be able to answer those questions quickly. I always have someone with me, but I also take a diary. I just jot notes. Even if it's after the appointment, I just jot what I thought was key. Little things like weight, how I felt. Especially in between treatment, I write any issues that I had in that cycle. Just headaches or feelings. Just jot them down, date it, and you've got it there.
Before my surgery, I was looking at psychosocial aspects of prostate cancer, and that's what I've done my PhD on. And that was one of my aims, was to finish the PhD, because I was right in, towards the end of the whole study when I was diagnosed. But in the meantime, I've finished and graduated, and that's been something of a milestone. I don't think many people who have got a brain tumour get their PhD, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think the main things that have helped me now is that eventually I found, via the Cancer Council, I found support that was outside of the home, because everyone else had to go back to their regular life, and here I was isolated at home. I couldn't go anywhere, and I started to probably go a little bit downhill in my mental health, and initially I was doing a cancer phone call, which was like from the Cancer Council of New South Wales. It was a conference call, so there could have been 8 people. But I found that was really difficult with so many people trying to work out who was saying what. And eventually I decided that I needed to find a face-to-face support group, and was surprised that there were a few. And I started going to one, and I think in July 2011, so that's how much after my treatment had finished, and I still go to that one every month. And as a result of that, I get to see and meet people that are going through a similar. We have access to music therapy. I'm in a choir now that I go to every Monday, and I get to sing my lungs out. It's fantastic. And I've done art therapy, and I've just learnt so much. I wish I had have known about that support group earlier. I think there's newly diagnosed patients coming in now, and how valuable that would be to have that, early on, yeah.
I think one of the obvious things when I've been diagnosed is the effect on the family, because I come from a large family, and they've been very supportive, so that's been excellent. But I think if your affairs are not in order, then there's a problem, because you're leaving a total mess for someone else to work out. So I think it's very important that you sort out all your bits and pieces and get it all organised, so you're not leaving that to somebody else.
In my life, I'd always written songs over my life which, relieved some of, the emotions that I was going through, and really I hadn't written a song for many years. And in those weeks and probably that following year, I did start to, realise I can still do that.
Currently, I'm working full-time, pretty much living my life as I was pre-diagnosis, apart from chemotherapy every month, but I am happy, married now, been on holidays, looking forward to my next holiday. I am different pre-diagnosis. I think I've grown. I am wary of the future, but I'm happy. And I'm happier now than I was probably before.
I would say, ring the Cancer Council, see what's available to you. Also, see a financial advisor. See, what entitlements you may have. You might have, something through your super, or, in my situation, I had a life insurance policy, and when I saw my financial advisor, he said to get paid out on that now rather than later, because the value decreases over time. I think that unless you're in the financial business, you wouldn't know that sort of thing, but also there might be something through Centrelink that you're entitled to. So I think that's, but really don't stay isolated, talk to others. Even through Cancer Council, you can talk with Cancer Connect. That's somebody who's had a similar experience that can ring you, so you don't have to go anywhere. They ring you, and and then they can let you know other things that are available to you. Yeah.
This adventure, this journey, as people call it. Always be optimistic, be hopeful, and just live life. Be happy. It's not great to be dealt this shitty card, but just be happy. And cope.